You have seen the movies. The open sea, the treasure, the adventure, the freedom. A captain with a cool hat standing at the bow of his ship, looking dramatic while the wind blows his coat perfectly behind him. And you have probably thought, yeah, that actually sounds kind of amazing. I would do that. You would not do that. Or more accurately, you would do it once, for about 3 days, and then you would be begging to go home. Because the reality of life on a pirate ship during the Golden Age of Piracy, roughly 1650 to 1730, is so different from what Hollywood shows you that the two things barely share a name. This is what surviving on a pirate ship actually required. Let's start with the thing that killed more pirates than any sword fight, any naval battle, any cannon, or any rival crew. The food. Your primary food source on a pirate ship was something called hardtack. Hardtack was a biscuit made of flour, water, and salt, baked until it was essentially a rock. It did not taste good. It was not meant to taste good. It was meant to last, and it did last, sometimes for months or years. The problem was that over time, hardtack became home to weevil larvae, tiny white worms that lived inside the biscuit, which you could not see until you broke it open. Experienced sailors learned to eat hardtack in the dark, so they did not have to look at what they were putting in their mouth. They also learned to tap the hardtack on a hard surface before eating it, which knocked some of the weevils out. Some of them. Your main protein source was salted meat, usually beef or pork, stored in barrels of brine for months. This meat was tough, frequently rancid, and so saturated with salt that it had to be soaked in water for hours before it was remotely edible. Soaked in water that was itself not particularly clean. Speaking of water, water was stored in wooden casks and quickly developed algae, turning slimy and green and foul-smelling. You could not drink it straight. Pirates mixed it with rum to create something called grog, not as a luxury or a celebration, but as a necessity, because the alcohol helped kill some of the bacteria and masked the smell enough that you could get it down. So your daily diet on a pirate ship was weevil biscuits, rancid salted meat, and rum water, every day, for weeks or months at a time. No fresh fruit, no vegetables, nothing with vitamin C. Which brings us to scurvy. Scurvy is what happens to your body when it goes long enough without vitamin C. And it is one of the most unpleasant ways a human body can begin to fall apart. Your gums swell and bleed, your teeth loosen and fall out. Old wounds that had healed years ago reopen, because the collagen holding your tissue together literally begins to dissolve without vitamin C to maintain it. Your skin bruises at the slightest touch. Your joints swell. You become too exhausted to move. And eventually, if nothing changes, you die. This was not a rare occurrence on pirate ships. Scurvy was a constant and expected threat. Pirates who made port regularly, or who captured ships carrying citrus fruit, fared better. Those who spent long stretches at sea without finding fresh food paid for it with their bodies. Disease, infection, and accidents killed far more pirates than combat ever did. The cramped quarters below deck were filthy, humid, and perfect for the spread of dysentery, typhoid, and fever. Rats were everywhere. Fleas and lice were universal. If you got an infected wound, which was easy to do given the conditions, you had very little in the way of effective treatment. The ship's doctor, if there was one, might amputate a limb with a saw and a bottle of rum as anesthesia. Survival was not guaranteed. Now let's talk about something that will genuinely surprise you. Pirate ships were, in many ways, more democratic than almost any other society of their era. Think about what a pirate crew actually was. Most pirates had previously served in the Royal Navy or on merchant ships, where the captain had absolute power, conditions were brutal, pay was poor, and there was essentially no recourse if you were mistreated. Pirates were, in many cases, men who had decided they had had enough of that system and were willing to take the risk of running their own operation instead. And the operation they built was surprisingly egalitarian. The captain of a pirate ship was elected by the crew, not appointed, not inherited, not simply claimed because someone was the strongest. Elected. If the crew decided the captain was incompetent, cowardly, or was treating them unfairly, they could vote him out. The captain's authority was absolute only during battle or when chasing a target. At all other times, he was essentially accountable to the crew. The quartermaster, who managed day-to-day affairs and ration supplies, was also elected. Major decisions including whether to attack a particular ship and how to divide the loot were often put to a crew vote. Pirates had written contracts, called articles, that every crew member signed before joining. These articles laid out exactly how the loot would be divided, what the rules of conduct were on board, and what compensation crew members would receive if injured in service. If you lost your right hand in a battle, you were compensated. If you lost your left hand, a slightly lower amount. An eye, another amount. A leg, another. There was a structured injury compensation system on pirate ships before most navies in the world had anything of the kind. This was not a utopia. Punishments for breaking the articles could be brutal, including flogging and marooning. The democracy had a violent edge. But compared to the Royal Navy of the same era, where a captain could have a man whipped for almost any reason with no recourse, pirate ships were genuinely more free. Now let's talk about the actual danger, because this part is nothing like the movies either. A pirate ship was not primarily a place of exciting sword fights and heroic one-on-one combat. Real pirate attacks were usually fast and psychologically based. Pirates relied heavily on their reputation. A ship flying a pirate flag was often intended to terrify a merchant vessel into surrendering without a fight, because pirates knew that a real battle damaged both ships and killed crew members they could not easily replace. When combat did happen, it was brutal, fast, and chaotic. Cannons, close-quarters fighting, smoke, noise, blood. There was nothing cinematic about it. If you were hit by a cannonball, that was the end. If you were wounded seriously enough, amputation was likely. If the wound became infected, which it often did, death was likely after that. And then there was the sea itself. Storms at sea in the early 18th century, on a wooden ship with no weather forecasting and no radio, were simply catastrophic events that you survived or you did not. Hurricanes in the Caribbean wiped out entire pirate fleets. Navigational errors ran ships aground. Leaks developed. Sails tore. Masts snapped. The oceans was not a backdrop for adventure. It was an active threat that required constant vigilance just to stay alive. Could you survive on a pirate ship? Here is the honest answer. If you were healthy, reasonably strong, not prone to seasickness, willing to eat things you would rather not think about, capable of learning useful skills quickly, and lucky enough to avoid the diseases, accidents, and storms that killed the majority of pirates before any enemy ever got to them, you might last a while. But you would not be the swashbuckling hero from the movies. You would be a person eating weevils in the dark, drinking rum to make the water bearable, watching your gums bleed from scurvy, scrubbing decks, and maintaining rigging in all weather, and going weeks or months at a time without anything that resembled a good day. The pirates of the Golden Age were not romantic figures who chose freedom over comfort. They were mostly desperate men who chose one form of misery over another and hoped the payoff would eventually be worth it. For most of them, it was not. The average pirate career lasted about 2 years. Most ended in death, capture, or the realization that the life was simply not sustainable. A very small number retired with enough money to live on. Most did not. This has been Could You Survive? New videos every week putting modern humans in history's most brutal eras. If this made you reconsider how you feel about your lunch, subscribe. Because next time we are going somewhere that will test you in completely different ways. See you then.